In 2016, you decide abruptly to put down the mic and stop being a recording artist.
It wasn't abrupt for me.
Really?
Yeah, I had thought about that since 2013.
How did that idea gestate?
It was one last tour that we went on. I forgot where we were, but we were in a van traveling somewhere, and just like enough is enough. Enough is enough of this city. Just this. Just this. Let's just be daring enough to do something else and try something different where we maybe don't have all the answers or the experience. That's really what it was.
What about just the satisfaction that you get from writing and recording music? You know, obviously your music is incredibly personal.
That's too selfish. It's too selfish to only think about the satisfaction that I get from writing, recording, and releasing music when I have children. It's no longer about me. At the end of my run, I felt like I paid my service. I did all that I was willing to do for me. That whole 15-year run, that was for me. Now it's time to consider some other things and some other people. And the best way for me to do that was to not rap.
When you were penning that last verse, did you know explicitly this is it?
I maybe envisioned a comeback sooner than it's been, but yeah, at the time I knew that was my last verse and I was heading into retirement. I want to say it was the final verse on Idols on Rage and Machine.
What was the path from making these independent records, the mood musics, to then starting, we'll name this podcast later?
That podcast, we started that podcast in 2015. Didn't know what a podcast was, didn't know what was expected, how we would make a business out of it. But again, we're early on something and I'm having a good time, so let's just keep it going. I always thought that after rap, I would be on radio somewhere. But those people never left those seats. So now the great broadcasters have to go find another way. So it's back to digital. I think I did Combat Jack's show in 2011, and I was amazed that they sat there and it was a 3-hour broadcast and that people were glued and tuned into that. So that felt good.
The podcast had been unmonetized or very modestly monetized at that point. How were you thinking about that pivot from a business standpoint?
Well, I didn't think that podcasting would remain that way. Right, like I saw a change happening sometime soon. So again, staying afloat long enough to play another hand. Complex and Everyday Struggle enabled me to have the freedom over here to kind of just wait the field out.
I just remember thinking like, this is something different from anything I've ever seen before. And yeah, then we turned it into Everyday Struggle and
lightning in a bottle. That was one of the best shows, period. Like I'm saying in hip hop, but that was one of the best shows, period.
I agree with you that it was the best hip hop show.
I stand in that. I don't give a what show they bring up. That was the one.
Where you were at, where AC was at the moment, and I mean, you look at the marketplace in the last 6 years, that was the blueprint for all.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It was. And it was great. It was great. Do I have an ultimate creative goal? I don't think I have that vivid of an imagination. I do still believe in the almighty higher power, right? Like some of the things happening are beyond some of my wildest dreams. So my goal is to play the hand long enough to see how it plays out.
At the time, you had the Joe Budden podcast with Rory and Mal, and you guys had sort of found, your groove with the main show and shooting in a story at that point. How did you think about Everyday Struggle and approaching it to create a non-competitive but sort of complementary product?
Well, back then, I mean, you were there for this. We weren't about to hire one of my friends, and that's who I was partnering with at the time. So great, we're off to a great start. We're gonna hire somebody. I was looking to hire somebody that I could yell at. That's what I was looking for, a contrast in thought and opinion and delivery, and when we found it, that was it. That was it. So yeah, that was gonna be different. Again, hip hop doing the debate style show with shout out to all the producers and everybody that was involved in that year that I was there. Everybody hit out the park. Everybody.
Which sort of segues to the way that you have, you've been on both sides of labor disputes with Complex as talent and also with the Joe Budden podcast and the Joe Budden Network as a manager and a CEO.
Mm-hmm.
Has being in both of those seats changed your perspective on what it is like to sit in either one of them?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it takes a special person to deal with me on some mornings. Yeah. I would hate to have me as the headache. I ain't gonna. Woo-wee. Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely changed my perspective a bit. I understand. I just understand more now. I understand both sides. Not just on the Complex example, but the Def Jam. Like in hindsight, I totally get it. I totally get it. Everything makes sense. Everything makes sense. I would have paid me, just so we're clear. Well, now that I understand both sides, I would have paid me. But again, more learning, more experience. I wouldn't trade it for anything. My time there, even the beefs with whoever I was beefing with. Like, yeah, no, I learned a different way at Complex. Okay, let's just approach this differently. Made for a much better business partner for everyone that came after you guys.
With everyday struggle in the rearview mirror, Joe set about expanding his media empire. While professional and personal controversies have challenged these efforts along the way, Budden has remained undaunted and undistracted in his pursuit. His podcast remains as relevant today as it's ever been, and his business continues to thrive as he works to plot the next chapter in his ascendance to the Hip Hop Media Hall of Fame.